Hello, my darlings. This is your Nana Rose, and today I brought you one of those stories that truly tug at the heart. Can you believe someone actually invited his ex-girlfriend to his own wedding? Just to watch her suffer? I know, it sounds like a soap opera, but it really happened. What this millionaire didn't expect was for her to show up with two little boys, who looked exactly like him. Oh, my dears, what happens next will leave you speechless. So go ahead, pour yourself a nice cup of tea, get comfy, and come with me to find out what fate had in store for this family.
Edward Mitchell, a name synonymous with technological innovation and stratospheric wealth in New York, stood on the precipice of an emotional abyss he, ironically, couldn't foresee despite his analytical and perspicacious mind. At the zenith of his career, with a digital empire built from the ground up and on the verge of formalizing his union with Madison Clark, a digital influencer whose impeccable image was as meticulously constructed as the algorithms he mastered, Edward appeared to have reached the pinnacle of success. Yet, behind the facade of an accomplished billionaire, a deep-seated resentment simmered, a scar from the past he cultivated with unwavering obstinacy. The impending wedding, a media event of epic proportions, was more than just a celebration of love. It was the culmination of a meticulously crafted scheme designed to inflict pain upon the only woman who had dared to thwart his ambitions: Rachel Thompson. Years prior, when Edward was merely a promising programmer and Rachel a dedicated medical student, they had shared an incandescent romance, a youthful love that seemed destined to endure. However, Edward's obsession with code and his relentless pursuit of success forged an irreparable chasm between them. Rachel, prioritizing a shared future and the necessity for equilibrium, demanded he choose between her and his ambition. He chose ambition, and the relationship terminated abruptly. Now, at the zenith of his power, Edward envisioned his marriage to Madison as the perfect opportunity to flaunt his triumph to Rachel, to demonstrate to her precisely what she had forfeited by doubting his potential. The irony was almost tangible. He who had amassed his fortune by connecting people was now leveraging that very fortune to perpetuate a painful disconnect. The invitation extended to Rachel was not a gesture of reconciliation, but rather a poisoned barb intended to reopen long-festering wounds. He desired to see her suffer, to witness the impact of his success upon her life, to prove unequivocally that his chosen path had been the correct one. Unbeknownst to Edward, consumed as he was by his meticulously planned vengeance, was the existence of a secret that would irrevocably alter the course of his life. Shortly after their relationship ended, Rachel discovered she was pregnant. She desperately attempted to contact him, but her emails and visits were systematically intercepted by Beatrice Montgomery, Edward's ruthless mentor. Beatrice, an astute and calculating businesswoman, viewed the pregnancy as a threat to the future of the company and to Edward's limitless potential. She, with her subtle and manipulative influence, ensured that Rachel never succeeded in speaking with him, convinced that she was shielding her protégé from an unnecessary distraction. On her wedding day, under the dazzling glare of the spotlights and the curious gazes of New York's elite, Rachel appeared. But she wasn't alone. Beside her stood 5-year-old twin boys, Liam and Noah, whose resemblance to Edward was undeniable, almost unnerving. The boys' presence cast a deathly silence over the crowd. The shock was palpable, disbelief etched on the faces of the guests. Madison, the bride, realized instantly that she had been used, that her marriage was a sham, an instrument of revenge. Humiliated and enraged, she called off the wedding at the altar, exposing the fragility of the facade Edward had carefully constructed. Devastated and reeling, Edward watched his world crumble. The success he had so prized felt hollow and meaningless in the face of the shocking revelation. He had lost Rachel years ago, but now he realized he had also forfeited the opportunity to be a father, to know his children. The vengeance he had so craved had become a boomerang, striking him with devastating force. From that moment forward, the life of Edward Mitchell, the ruthless billionaire, would take an unforeseen turn, a journey of self-discovery, remorse, and, perhaps, redemption. The road ahead would be arduous, fraught with obstacles and uncertainties, but the pursuit of truth and the chance to reconnect with his children offered a glimmer of hope amidst the turmoil. Reeling from the revelation, Edward found himself navigating a sea of uncertainty, uncharted territory for a man accustomed to controlling every facet of his life. The dismissal of Beatrice, formerly his mentor and confidant, was an impulsive act, a visceral reaction to the betrayal he perceived. The trust that had always been the bedrock of his empire had been shaken to its very core. The quest to unearth proof of Rachel's communications being intercepted became an all-consuming obsession, devouring his nights and casting a pall over the luster of his past achievements. Anger and resentment weren't his only companions. A spark of curiosity, a long-dormant emotion, began to stir within him. Who were Liam and Noah? How had Rachel raised their children alone, without his support? The image of Rachel, formerly associated with rejection and failure, began to morph in his mind. He now perceived her as a strong and independent woman, a devoted mother who had faced unimaginable challenges with grace and resilience. Furthermore, the media and societal reaction to his personal life exposed a vulnerability he had never publicly displayed. The image of the invincible billionaire began to unravel, revealing a fallible man susceptible to the same errors and regrets as anyone else. The sensationalist headlines and malicious social media commentary struck him hard, reminding him that financial success was not synonymous with happiness or acceptance. Alongside his internal turmoil, Edward initiated legal proceedings against Beatrice, determined to hold her accountable for her actions. The court battle became a reflection of his own inner struggle, an attempt to purge the ghosts of the past and construct a more just and honest future. However, he soon realized that retribution was not the answer. The pursuit of justice was important, but it could not heal the deep wounds he had inflicted. Instead of focusing solely on the legal battle, Edward decided to take a crucial step, seeking out Rachel and their children. The approach, however, was cautious and tentative. He knew he had inflicted irreparable pain and that regaining Rachel's trust would be an arduous undertaking. But the image of the twins, with their inquisitive eyes and innocent smiles, propelled him forward to overcome the fear of rejection and embrace the uncertainty of the future. Now, envision how this situation unfolds when you're confronted with the imperative to rebuild bridges in the aftermath of a period of conflict. The linchpin lies in honesty and a willingness to accept accountability for your missteps. Much like Edward, one must set aside pride and the pursuit of retribution and instead focus on constructing a future predicated on respect and mutual understanding. The journey will be protracted and arduous, but the ultimate outcome, the prospect of reconciliation and the forging of stronger, more meaningful relationships, is worth every ounce of effort. Edward's approach to Rachel was, understandably, met with a blend of skepticism and trepidation. After all, he was the man who had prioritized ambition over love, the man who had become a billionaire at the expense of his own happiness and, unknowingly, that of their children. Rachel, however, had always been a person of profound compassion and emotional intelligence. She recognized the sincerity in Edward's plea for forgiveness, even as the pain of the past still throbbed in her heart. Rather than dismissing him outright, Rachel proposed a trial period of sorts. She would allow Edward to be around the children, but under her stringent stipulations. He was not to leverage his wealth to buy their affection, nor could he meddle with the upbringing she had already instituted. The aim was straightforward: to enable Liam and Noah to formulate their own judgment of their father, unencumbered by either financial incentives or lingering resentment. Thus, Edward began to attend the twins' activities, watching their soccer games, participating in their birthday parties, and reading them bedtime stories. Initially, the boys were reserved and wary, accustomed to a life devoid of a paternal presence. However, with the passage of time, that barrier began to erode. The children's innate curiosity, coupled with Edward's patience and genuine interest, fostered the development of a bond. Liam was discovered to be a budding mathematical prodigy, captivated by numbers and patterns. Edward, leveraging his programming expertise, found a means to connect with his son by imparting the fundamentals of logic and problem-solving. Noah, conversely, was a natural-born artist, possessing a fertile imagination and a remarkable flair for drawing. Edward encouraged him to explore his creativity, lavishing him with art supplies and escorting him to museums and galleries. As Edward devoted more time to his children, he began to apprehend just how hollow his success felt in their absence. The luster of business meetings and lucrative deals faded, supplanted by a profound sense of fulfillment when witnessing Liam grapple with a complex problem or Noah conjuring an original work of art. He started to understand that genuine success wasn't gauged by figures, but rather by the quality of his relationships and the affirmative impact he had on the lives of those he cherished. Edward's journey was not without its hurdles. Rachel's distrust lingered, fueled by the memory of the pain he had inflicted. She harbored a fear that he might revert to the ambitious, work-obsessed man who had abandoned her years prior. Furthermore, the presence of Daniel, a physician friend of Rachel's who had always been a constant in the twins' lives, engendered a certain unease in Edward. Daniel was a kind and considerate man, a stalwart of support for Rachel and the boys. Edward felt threatened by their closeness, fearing he could never truly supplant the paternal role that Daniel had already filled. Now, consider how this applies when you're attempting to reconnect with individuals who have been hurt in the past. The linchpin lies in consistency and the sustained demonstration of change. It's insufficient to simply ask for forgiveness. You must prove, through your actions, that you have learned from your transgressions and that you are committed to forging a different future. Patience and empathy are paramount, as trust is not rebuilt instantaneously. Above all, it is imperative to respect the boundaries and needs of those who were wronged, allowing them to dictate the pace of reconciliation. The family dynamic, once defined by absence and resentment, was beginning to morph into something resembling an imperfect normality. Edward was gradually learning to reconcile the demands of his professional life with the responsibilities of fatherhood. He reduced his working hours at the company, delegating tasks and trusting his team so that he could be present for the milestones in Liam and Noah's lives. This shift, however, was not met with universal enthusiasm. Certain shareholders and board members questioned his dedication, fearing that his focus on family could potentially impair the company's performance. Conversely, Edward found unexpected support from some of his colleagues, who secretly admired his courage to defy expectations and prioritize his children's well-being. One of them, a long-standing executive who had sacrificed his own family life in the name of professional success, confessed to Edward that he was living with the regret of not having been present for his children when they were young. This conversation served as a potent reminder to Edward that he was on the right path, even if that path was circuitous and fraught with challenges. Edward began exploring avenues to leverage his wealth and influence to effect positive change in the lives of others. Inspired by Rachel's experiences as a pediatrician, he established a foundation dedicated to supporting single mothers and fathers, offering financial resources, legal aid, and early childhood development programs. The foundation became a source of profound pride for Edward, a means of atoning for his past transgressions and contributing to a more just and equitable world. Edward's relationship with Daniel, Rachel's physician friend, remained a source of underlying tension incidentally. While Daniel was invariably affable and respectful, Edward couldn't shake the feeling that he was vying for a place in Rachel's and the boys' lives. On one particular occasion, during Liam's soccer match, Edward and Daniel found themselves standing side by side in the bleachers. The conversation started stilted and superficial, but as time wore on, they began to tentatively open up to one another. Daniel revealed to Edward that he had always admired Rachel's dedication to her children and that he felt honored to be a part of their lives. He also voiced his concern regarding the potential impact that Edward's sudden reappearance could have on the boys, particularly given the trauma of their father's absence. Edward, in turn, shared his insecurities and his heartfelt desire to be a good father to Liam and Noah. The candid conversation enabled Edward and Daniel to establish a mutual understanding. They realized that, despite their differences and conflicting sentiments, they both shared the same objective: the well-being of Rachel and the boys. From that point forward, their relationship became more collaborative and respectful, with both working in concert to cultivate a stable and loving home environment for Liam and Noah. Now, consider how this situation applies when you find yourself in a competitive environment or a complex relationship. It's crucial to recognize that there doesn't always need to be a winner or a loser. Instead, seek out common ground and areas for collaboration and be willing to set aside pride and rivalry in pursuit of a larger objective. The key lies in open and honest communication, empathy, and a willingness to see the world from another's perspective. Despite the evident strides made, the shadow of the past continued to loom over the family's future. Edward, once so fixated on control, now found himself at the mercy of forces he barely comprehended. The vagaries of childhood, the intricacies of human relationships, the unpredictability of love. The foundation, while a laudable endeavor, had also become a persistent reminder of his misdeeds, a form of public penance that, at times, left him utterly drained. The relationship with Rachel, in particular, remained a delicate balancing act. There was mutual respect, undoubtedly, and a burgeoning admiration for each other's parenting styles. However, the flame of romance, once so incandescent, seemed to have been extinguished, replaced by a cautious and pragmatic friendship. Edward, accustomed to achieving all he desired, had to learn to accept that not all mistakes can be undone, nor all hearts won back. Adding to this was the mounting pressure from the media, which tracked every step of his journey toward redemption. Paparazzi hounded him, seeking candid shots of moments of vulnerability, exploiting his history to fuel sensationalist headlines. Edward, who had once thrived on public attention, now loathed it, realizing just how superficial and ruthless fame could be. Amidst the turmoil and ambiguity, Edward discovered a renewed sense of direction. He came to understand that his crowning achievement wasn't his wealth nor his corporation, but rather the chance to be an actively involved and affectionate father to Liam and Noah. He dedicated himself to learning about their passions, supporting them through their adversities, and instilling in them the values he himself had long overlooked: the significance of integrity, empathy, and unwavering resilience. Edward began to engage more actively in the community, championing social and environmental causes he had previously overlooked. He discovered that leveraging his wealth for the common good brought him a far greater sense of fulfillment than any lucrative deal. He became a staunch advocate for education, healthcare, and equal opportunities, wielding his influence to foster positive societal change. Conversely, the company, which had formerly been the very nucleus of his existence, began to wane in significance. Edward came to the stark realization that he had erected an empire at the expense of his own felicity and his interpersonal relationships. He commenced to interrogate the relentless and cutthroat business paradigm he had embraced, seeking more sustainable and socially accountable alternatives. Now, envision how this applies when you're confronted with an ethical quandary in your professional life. It's paramount to interrogate your values and priorities and to be prepared to make arduous choices, even if it entails sacrificing financial gain for the sake of a more profound purpose. Integrity and social responsibility must be the cornerstones of your decisions, steering you toward a more just and equitable future. Ultimately, true success isn't gauged in monetary terms, but rather by the positive impact you exert on the world. Faced with this evolving landscape, Edward felt compelled to reassess his trajectory. Relinquishing his position as CEO, once unthinkable, began to emerge as a tangible possibility. The notion of relinquishing complete control of the company, of handing the reins to a capable successor, no longer instilled the same dread it once had. The truth was that the burden of power, the relentless pursuit of innovation, and the constant pressure for results had become an unbearable weight, obscuring the joy of living and the beauty of simple moments. Furthermore, the realization that his presence in Liam and Noah's lives held more value than any professional achievement spurred him to make a sweeping decision. Edward understood that the true legacy he wished to leave his children was not a financial inheritance, but rather an exemplar of integrity, compassion, and unconditional love. He wanted them to remember him not as the ruthless billionaire, but as the father who was consistently present, who loved them above all else, and who taught them to be good and generous people. Edward began orchestrating his departure from the company, seeking a successor who not only shared his core values, but was also deeply committed to sustainability and social responsibility. The choice ultimately fell upon a bright and innovative young executive who had demonstrated a profound sense of ethics and a genuine concern for employee welfare. Edward meticulously mentored her, imparting his experience and expertise, thus preparing her to assume leadership of the company and guide it toward a more auspicious future. Concurrently, Edward dedicated himself to fortifying his bond with Rachel, striving to establish a solid and enduring partnership in raising Liam and Noah. He cultivated the ability to listen to her perspectives, respect her judgments, and appreciate her sagacity. Together, they fostered a harmonious and stable family environment, wherein the boys felt loved, secure, and sheltered. In contrast, his relationship with Daniel, once defined by tension and rivalry, blossomed into a sincere and respectful friendship. Edward acknowledged the pivotal role Daniel played in the lives of Rachel and the boys and came to appreciate his presence and support. Together, they forged a partnership, collaborating to cultivate a brighter future for Liam and Noah. Edward reconnected with his own family, seeking reconciliation with his parents and siblings, whom he had neglected during his relentless pursuit of success. He realized that the love and support of family were an invaluable treasure, and that lost time could never be regained. Edward endeavored to rebuild these bonds, dedicating time and attention to his family members, demonstrating how much he loved them and how deeply he regretted his past transgressions. Like the seasons that follow one another in an unending cycle, Edward's life has traversed a winter of solitude and regret, a spring of rebirth and hope, and now anticipates a summer of fulfillment and fruition. But, as we know, the seasons are ever in flux, and the future holds challenges and opportunities as yet unforeseen. The key, therefore, lies in our capacity to adapt to these vicissitudes, to glean wisdom from our missteps, and to nurture the values that sustain us even amidst the most trying of circumstances. As we gaze upon the unfolding horizon, we envision the prospect of a future where success is not gauged in figures, but rather in smiles, embraces, and moments shared with those we cherish. A future where compassion and generosity become the cornerstones of our actions and where collective well-being supersedes rampant individualism. A future, in essence, where the pursuit of happiness evolves into a perpetual journey of self-discovery and connection with the world around us. Edward's true legacy lies not in the financial statements of his former company, but in the legacy of love and responsibility he instills in the hearts of Liam and Noah. He understood, belatedly, that genuine success is not measured in trailing zeros, but in the ability to build bridges, heal wounds, and leave the world a slightly better place than he found it. The foundation that bears his name is not merely a demonstration of philanthropy, but a testament to his transformation, a commitment to reach out to those treading tortuous paths, offering them the hope of a fairer and more equitable future. Their relationship with Rachel, lacking the all-consuming passion of youth, blossomed into a mutual respect, a solid partnership grounded in admiration and gratitude. They had learned to value each other's differences, to celebrate successes, and to support one another in times of hardship. Daniel's presence, once a source of insecurity, had become a symbol of Edward's maturity, of his capacity to recognize the value of friendship and the importance of having good people by his side. Observing the serenity etched upon Edward's face, we can glimpse the epiphany that unshackled him from the constraints of his past. He apprehended that genuine freedom resides not in the absence of impediments, but in the capacity to surmount them, to glean wisdom from missteps, and to transmute suffering into fortitude. Edward's journey imparts to us that redemption is not a destination, but a perpetual process, an unremitting quest for the optimal iteration of ourselves. And as we conclude this narrative, we are invited to reflect upon our own individual journeys. What are the values that serve as our guiding principles? What legacies do we aspire to bequeath to posterity? Are we prepared to challenge societal expectations, to dismantle preordained paradigms, and to forge an authentic path even if it necessitates swimming against the tide? True practice commences now in the quietude of our hearts, in the integrity of our actions, and in the audacity to remain true to ourselves. May Edward Mitchell's story inspire us to seek redemption, to cultivate love, and to construct a world that is more equitable and compassionate. May the melody of his violin continue to resonate in our ears, reminding us that the beauty of life resides in the simple moments, in the genuine connections, and in the capacity to transmute pain into hope.